Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. I'm a Forbes contributor covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. Today's guest is Tony Robinson, who is a professor at Trinity College Dublin, all the way from Ireland. Welcome to the show, Tony.
Hi, thanks, Devin. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're excited to have you. It's interesting to have a professor on to talk about social entrepreneurship, but you really have been working to implement a new model of entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship with a new cook stove that you're developing for use in the developing world. And I think it's interesting to look at your model along with your stove technology.
Yeah, I mean, it's I would classify myself as a little bit of a rookie in this space, being in it for 5 or 6 years. But yeah, what we've through the process of starting a new technology and trying to develop it, in the developing world, Malawi in this case, for Malawi, we learned along the way that the business model, a lot of it hinges upon the business model. I mean, getting the technology right is engineering, and you have to do that right, and it's not easy. But getting the price point and getting the distribution, I mean, we're talking the potential of tens of millions, hundreds of millions. I mean, how do you get to those numbers at price points which are this low? So our hypothesis is that it needs to be designed for manufacture close to the consumer. Can we engineer the device so that it can be mostly manufactured and assembled in Malawi itself?
Yeah. Well, it is an exciting model. Do you have the stove there handy that you can show us?
Yeah, I have the components of the stove. So the stove itself is one that's it's a simple clay stove, and it is manufactured by local co-ops, typically women's co-ops. So it is the earth of Malawi. This thing's heavy to bring back to Ireland in your suitcase, but
I imagine so.
And they manufacture and sell them for somewhere to the tune of $2 American, probably a little bit less.
Now, the key, though, to your product is to generate some electricity. That's really your area of expertise, is thermo energy, right?
Yeah, thermoelectricity. So on a scoping mission, I mean, when I entered this space, when I decided to enter this space of addressing energy poverty, I went on a scoping mission to Malawi, and in my mind's eye, it was going to be a solar project. How could it not be a solar project? And being somewhat naive about Africa, you had this vision of this place bathed in sunshine. Now, we went in the rainy season, so it was bathed in rain. But when you went to the villages, around every corner there was a fire. Every corner, and I'm a thermodynamics and heat transfer professor. And one thing about fire, it's a very rich and concentrated source of energy. And this sort of vision of Malawi bathed in sunlight really changed into something a little bit more dark spotted with fire. And with that, the idea was, could we use that? I mean, one thing's for certain is that meals be prepared every day, and the fire will be lit every day and every evening. I mean, that is a consistent, reliable, repeatable source of energy. The trick was then, how do we tap into that source to generate sufficient electricity? And we've been through several technology demonstrators and field trials. And what we have now is something that looks a little bit like this, affectionately known as Das Boot. And it serves the purpose. So this would sit in through the side of the stove, acting as a grate, which improves the efficiency of the stove by allowing air to act underneath. But these are rods that draw heat from the chamber to a plate, and in between that is a thermoelectric module, which is a simple solid-state device that looks like this. So, and then on the opposite side is some angle iron that would have water in it, and that cools the thermoelectric device. And by having it hot on one side and cool on the other, it generates electricity. And with some circuitry that we've developed, They can now charge phones, low-powered radios, LED flashlights, and things like that. And it produces enough every day to for those type of electrical services with phones and lights.
So the stove also reduces the amount of fuel required compared with the traditional 3-stone fire, right?
Absolutely. Now, there are some, and I've seen even on your show, there are some stoves which are terribly efficient. I mean, in a good way. Now, this stove would not reach the levels of efficiency of the other stoves I've seen, but this is a $2 stove that's made locally, and it has that same what would you call it? The same business model, close to consumer manufacture. These people in the Chiola district that make us our stoves, they make and distribute stoves for all the people in the Chiola district, and that's how they're getting to the numbers of tens and tens and tens of thousands of these efficient stoves. Now, in the end of the day, the stove is much more efficient than an open fire, and it can use fuels which you wouldn't necessarily always use, corn husks and stuff.
So it has some potential benefits beyond being able to generate electricity. Let's go through it. What do you see as the issues people are facing? And I said, this isn't abstract. Now, you've been to Malawi a number of times. You've done real research to figure out what are the issues they're facing, and how does your stove solve those issues?
Well, like it or not, in the developing world, I mean, and Malawi being part of that, energy is fire. Energy, and most of that energy, I wouldn't put a number on, but I would bet that it's well over 90%, probably more, is fire for cooking, which is the stove. And the implication of that is human and environmental. The human aspect is the smoke. And as you well know, it's one of the #1 killers of the planet, is smoke inhalation from cooking in open fires. But let's not forget about the accessing wood. I mean, someone told me once, the age of a village is almost like you could tell it like the age of a tree. You have the rings, and you can count the rings. And if you go out and you look at a village and you see how far they have to go out to access wood, that can give you a sense of how old. I mean, it's metaphorical, but it's a way of thinking about it. But the access to fuel and the deforestation and the erosion of the soil and everything that comes along with it is it's terrible. So on the other side, there's access to lighting. And in a developing world, light is candles and paraffin lanterns. And then again, it's the smoke. It's the cost that they're spending an exorbitant amount of money on fuel. And the quality of light they get is the worst light that you can have, compared with something like an LED lantern. And then, and so in 2009, when I first went to Malawi, I had this, we're going to do a solar project for lights. That was my idea. And now we're doing a cookstove project for phones. And just in the process of 3 or 4 years, the chief might have had a phone. Now every adult has a phone, and in fact, they have 2 phones in case the battery dies on one. And so then you have in the same way that you have access to fuel. It's an access where you have to walk for miles and miles and miles and then pay money of some sort. Now the phones are the same. They have to walk to charging stations, which can be 5, sometimes 10 kilometers away, 3 kilometers, twice a week, and then pay money, up to a month's income for a year to keep their phones charged. So you put all that together, you see that there's an opportunity here. There's an opportunity to bring electricity to people locally, bring electricity into their homes, bring value to the cook stove as well. Adoption of cook stoves isn't necessarily like that. We're talking ancient traditions. People aren't just going to use it because it's there. But if you put a generator on that stove, whereby the phone is the most valuable thing in the home, and all of a sudden that stove becomes something that's very important. and hopefully you can affect the uptake of the technologies.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Now, how have you been working with the locals on the production side of things? Tell us a little bit about the process of getting this spooled up for production.
Yes. So again, it's trial and error. We like to use the word adaptive design as another way of saying trial and error. And so there are components that need to be manufactured. There's the stove itself, and we have modifications that need to be done on the stove. So we have a co-op in the Chiolo district of Malawi that have a stove production facility that do stoves, especially for us with our specific modifications. We initially had a sort of a roadside machine shop, and across the road a roadside woodworking shop doing a lot of the metal and the woodwork that we needed. So we're really trying to build most of the components, the hardware for the system, and we've had some success and some sort of failures with that. Some of the metal work is now being done at a machine shop in Blantyre, and so we're at the point now where all the pieces are being fabricated, and we're shipping in really the thermoelectric module. This isn't going to be made in Malawi. It's shipped in from China, and we're literally at the stage now of training another woman's co-op for putting it all together. Putting the stove, the stove and tightening the nuts and bolts and doing the diagnostics to make sure that everything works. So that's literally where we are now.
That's very exciting. So the stoves will be for sale at some scale in the very near future.
That's the hope and dream, yeah.
Now I want to step just back in time a little bit. The design process has been ongoing for 6 or more years.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the iteration, the data gathering, and how you've been through that process, because you've used some fairly scientific approaches to that.
Yeah. I guess one of the good things about being a rookie sometimes is you break rules that don't exist, right? Anyway, so when we decided, one thing we knew when we first started is that we were not going to get it right on the first shot, and we were a little bit nervous, might be the word, about about not having it right. So the question was, if we don't have it right, we know we're not. How are we going to know what we did right and what we did wrong? So the decision was made to spend some money on data logging equipment. So our first field trial, for example, was in 2011, I think, 2010, 2011, and we built 5 generators, and for 5 generator stoves, and we had 5 control stoves, and we put too many sensors on these stoves, probably about 10 sensors. So with the generators, we measured the combustion chamber temperature. So when the stoves were lit, we could watch in real time, when the stoves were on and off. We measured the power that was being drawn by the generator or being generated by the generator, but we also measured when they were using the energy. So we had these neat little graphs where you can see the generator, red little line making energy, and then we could see someone plug in a phone. Bloop, this little green line would come up, and we could trace them. And we did it over 3 months, and we were taking measurements every minute of every day for 3 months, over 10 sensors per over 10 stoves. It was an enormous amount of data, but we learned a ton. We were able to do engineering calculations. We were able to calculate how much on average energy people used every day. They had phones and they had LED lights, and they had radios, basic electrical services. People couldn't have put a number on how much energy do people need, and it was remarkably consistent across all of the groups. And we've done other.
Okay, I want to pause right there, Tony.
Yeah,
how much energy were they using? And you have a way of putting that in terms that a layman like me can understand.
Okay, so the answer was somewhere to the tune of 3 to 4 watt hours a day. Now, to put that into context, I don't know what we are probably using something to the tune of 5,000 watts a day.
Yeah.
So five watts a day, or 4 or 5 watt hours a day, 3 watt hours a day would be a small LED light. So a 1 watt LED light, a bright white one, running for 3 hours or 4 hours. And that's enough to keep a phone charged and a light charged every day. We were very surprised how little energy it was. And it was remarkably, like I said, consistent across all of the ones. And we published this data in scientific journals because we thought that was very important, because I've been to solar installations where I know how much they cost, 500 euros to put a solar system into a home. But it was producing 100 or 1,000 times more energy than is actually required for the service of phones and lights.
Yeah, that really is a fascinating data point, because these folks were walking, what did you say, 5 or 10 kilometers a day, or 5 or 10 miles a day to, or maybe not every day, but regularly, to charge their phones. And they needed the equivalent of a pixie dust amount of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is. And yeah, I mean, but the interesting thing that we were able to do with that information is this adaptive design process that we talk about. Is that we looked at it and we said, in fact, we were generating, because we were able to measure how much was being produced during just regular cooking cycles, and we were able to find out, and people don't have this data either, how long the stoves were lit during the day. We had a lot of anecdotal information, 3 hours. It wasn't. It was 6 to 8 hours a day these stoves were lit. And what we were able to do is we were able to say, okay, well, we can re-engineer the system, take some of the more expensive components out of it, because they're using it for longer. So we can still sort of fill up the tank with a lower performance system, because we now know that people use the stoves longer than 3 hours a day, which was the design point that we built it for here in Dublin, because the information was anecdotal. So we've been using this hard data, these measurements, and the team here are really good at taking lots of information and crunching it down into something useful. And we actually use that to feed back into the actual design of the technology.
It's really fascinating, and clearly that data gathering process was invaluable to perfecting the device in the end, and certainly trumps
anecdotal surveys.
The anecdotal data that most people are relying on for that kind of thing. They think they've done it all once they've been in country and talked to a few locals. That's really fascinating.
There's no other way to do it if it's a technology, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now, I want to just take advantage. I've got a couple of personal questions for you. I'm always fascinated when I meet people who are doing great things. And so clearly, as you roll this process out, you become a role model to your students, to the people in Malawi, to who knows how many people in the world. Who do you look up to as a role model?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say in this context, I really admire a guy named David Irvine Halliday. I don't know if you know or have heard of him. He's a Scottish fella, and he was a professor emeritus now, I think, at the University of Calgary. But he spent his time as an academic, so there's some parallels with me. And he spent his time teaching and doing research and science and pushing the boundaries of knowledge and like we're meant to do in academia. And then he and his wife Jenny were on a trekking trip in Nepal, and then he saw darkness. He saw that darkness and the poverty and all those. And the curtain kind of opened up, and he saw the connotations of energy poverty, and he put the brakes on his life and took a complete left turn. He decided that he was going to have an impact in helping people and helping people in the developing world. He started an NGO, Light Up the World. They were the first NGO to bring LED lights to the developing world, which is pervasive now. They've probably lit up, well over 1 million, maybe 1.25 million people over 50 countries or so. But I think what's really important is that over time he's sort of ran the gauntlet from NGO to social entrepreneur. He's the founder and the executive chairman of visionary lighting and energy in India. And, he didn't do this for profit business for profit. He did it because with his experience, he knows that this is the way that he can have the largest impact in this space of bringing energy and bringing light to people is through a capitalist business model. So, I admire that vision. I admire his passion, his positive spirit, and his endless enthusiasm. But I also really respect and admire his talent as an engineer, because what they're doing is developing technologies. And I feel a lot of parallels to what I'm doing, albeit I'm kind of at an earlier stage in a different country and on a different technology. But he's to me, he's a role model.
Well, certainly. Now, I understand why the issues you're tackling in terms of health of women and children, the opportunities associated with having a charged up cell phone and a lantern as opposed to not having those things, the dangers of kerosene, the weaknesses of candles. I get all of that. What I want to understand from you is why you personally chose to care about this. It's one thing to study it. It is entirely another thing.
Yeah.
To go to Malawi over and over again and actually work at finding a solution. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's a bit circular. I mean, I care because I care. I don't know if that's a fair thing to say, but I mean, yourself, when you see these levels of poverty, like in places like rural Malawi, and you finally get it. You like the penny drops, and you internalize, what vulnerability really is, and the implications of that, and how hard these people work. They work so hard, to keep themselves above water, and to keep themselves alive, to keep themselves fed and safe. How could you not care? I mean, it's just human. And I suppose specifically, why do I care about energy poverty? I've been training as an engineer for 25 years. I started in university, and I'm still here 25 years later. It's training, learning, training. One thing about being in a university setting, it's a never-ending process of learning. And I've learned about energy. I teach energy, and in that context, because I care, and because you can't help but care. But this is something where I can do something. I can do something with the skill set that I have because I've been trained for this. If I was a medical doctor in the same sort of emotional space, I would be doing health.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's where it comes from.
Now, I want to get just one last question. You obviously spend a lot of time offering tips and advice to students, but I want to tap into a thread you probably don't tap into all the time, but with your social entrepreneur hat on. Yeah. Help us identify an impact hack, something that we can do every day that would help us do more good.
Yeah. First, surround yourself with good people. I mean, that's not always the easiest thing to do. I mean, we all work in and around people, but getting a team and getting these people that you can feed off of, and they can feed off of you, and have the same sort of altruistic sort of motivations, and will work tirelessly to do good. I mean, I think that has to come. None of us will do this by ourselves. It's a group effort. And people like Maurice Deasy and Seamus O'Shaughnessy here, my team at Trinity. I mean, they've done the heavy lifting, and we've kept each other going through thick and thin. But one thing I could offer from a perspective of a scientist. I mean, I've been trained as a scientist. I publish in scientific journals, and I do research in science. Is that one thing you learn as being a scientist is that there's no such thing as failure. You're just doing something the wrong way, and you have to learn, and you have to adapt, and you have to get yourself over that hurdle to the next hurdle. And if you're doing your job right, you don't know what that next hurdle is going to be. So I suppose that the hack would be that failure is okay. there's no such thing as failure. It's something you're going to learn from, and you're going to gain knowledge, you're going to gain experience, and if you just get up and keep moving on and on. And don't get me wrong, doing this project is developing an innovative new technology in Dublin for Malawi. It's hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. It's an endless row of hurdles, but they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller, it seems, as we get closer to the end. But it would have been pretty easy to get disheartened and throw in the towel early. But we would have no science and we'd have no knowledge if scientists did that. And if you can map that same sort of philosophy onto developing technologies or any other thing, I think there's a hack in there somewhere.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Tony, it's been great to have you. I thank you for taking the time today. Before you go, tell people how they can connect with you to learn more about your work and your research.
Right. So our project is lovingly called the Empower Cookstove. So it's small m, P-O-W-E-R, Cookstove. And so that would be our Twitter hashtag, Empower Cookstove. And it would also be our Facebook. And I can always be reached in Trinity College Dublin. I am the only Tony or Anthony Robinson in Trinity College Dublin, so it's an easy enough place to find. And my email is arobbins, A-R-O-B-I-N-S, at tcd, trinitycollegedublin.ie.
Fantastic. Well, Tony, thank you very much for being with us today, and we wish you every success in scaling up your Empower Cookstoves in Malawi.
All right. Thanks, Devin.
All righty. Let's do some good.
All right. Let's do some good.